Hey, welcome back to Brighter Rays this week. We have started looking at Proverbs chapter 5, 15 through 23. This is called Before the Eyes of the Lord. Today we're looking at a section I've labeled God Says, Enjoy Marriage. We're going to look at really focusing on 15 through 19. So let's start by reading that, which says, Drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. Should your springs be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be for yourself alone, and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth. A lovely deer, a graceful doe, let her breasts fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love. All right. So we're talking about sexual immorality, and what God says here is sexual immorality. The answer he gave to that is biblical marriage. Biblical marriage. That's what it is. And so we start off here with the idea: drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well, and should your springs be scattered abroad. One of the first things we get from this idea is that you should either get married or abstain from sexuality. Those are the two choices you have. You should get married or abstain. Now, only some people are granted this ability to abstain. Paul talks about that. But the idea here that he's talking about in Proverbs 15 is, or Proverbs 5, is the expectation that you would get married, and that would be the answer. That would be the answer to the temptation of sexual immorality, is having for the young man here to get yourself a wife. Get married, he says. That's what you need to do. You're tempted to sexual immorality, then you get married. So, that's the first step. Step number 2, if you get married, let it be a joy. Verse 18 says, Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth. So, Isaiah 62:5. This is what should happen, since God uses this as an analogy for himself. If you get married, it should be a joy, right? That's what it normally is. But, so that's what God uses for himself. He says, For as a young man marries a young woman, so shall your sons marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you. So he's using this idea of marriage to point to himself, God is, and saying, just like how the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, that's how I am with you. That's how I will rejoice over you. And so this is, the idea is that normally the groom rejoices over the bride. That's normal. He's using this as a typical thing. Usually there's joy in there. That's normally what happens. And so he's saying, using that as an example for himself, by saying, yeah, that's how I would, you know how that is. You know how that works when the groom is so excited to see the bride, to be with the bride. That's how I will be with you. And so, if that wasn't the norm, then why would God use that? But that's the idea. That's the normal thing that normally happens. If you get married, it's supposed to be a joy. It's supposed to be joy. If it's not, then you're the problem. Not because there's something wrong with it, but it's because you're the problem. You're messing it up. You're doing something wrong. And then in Ecclesiastes 9:9 it says, Enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because this is your portion in life, and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. And so he says, enjoy life with your wife whom you love, all the days of your empty life, your meaningless life. That's what you should do. You should be enjoying it. I mean, this is one thing. This is a gift. This is your portion that God has given to you. Why wouldn't you enjoy this? Why wouldn't you enjoy this person? Why wouldn't you enjoy this relationship? That's what it's for. If you get married, it's supposed to be a joy. If it's not, then you are doing it wrong. If you're struggling in your marriage, it's because either, both of you got a problem. You got a problem that you have to work out. It should be a joy. This is how God designed it, to be a joy. Right? So we got the idea of sexual immorality. If you're tempted to sexual immorality, you either abstain or you get married. Right? Well, that was the whole thing at the beginning there. And then if you do get married, let it be a joy. Don't mess it up. Don't do it in poorly. Don't destroy it. Don't You have to work to make it so it's not a joy. Because that's normally what it should be. And that's normally what it would be if you followed God. Now, if you get married, your son, listen, if you get married, pour all of your fondness and desire into that one person. Forsake, that's what we normally say when we say our vows, right? To forsake all others, right? I've forsaken all others. It's exactly what you need to do here. In 2 Samuel 12:3, it says, "But the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, which he had bought. And he brought it up, and it grew up with him and with his children. It used to eat all his morsel and drink from his cup and lie in his arms, and it was like a daughter to him." See, this is Nathan's story that he gave to David, and he's describing Bathsheba and her relationship with Uriah. And he's using this idea of the lamb, and see how the rich man or the poor man has this one little ewe lamb. He has nothing really else, but he has this one ewe lamb, and he spends all of his money with it, and his grew up with his children. And so he's describing this kind of intimacy with this lamb, this closeness, this care, this nourishing of this little lamb, and how precious it is to him, and it's like a daughter to him. And so you got this kind of this affection for this lamb, because this is all he has besides his children, obviously, is the lamb. And so you see that kind of that picture here that Nathan is giving. That's the relation. Nathan's parable about Bathsheba really is that kind of, Uriah was, this is the only thing that he has that's of value really outside of his other family is this lamb. And so it shows that kind of closeness of that marriage relationship, and how Uriah was viewing Bathsheba as so precious, so tender with, and so close, and just everything is about the lamb, and everything was about Bathsheba. And then David came in and destroyed that. But the idea there, that is a good thing, right? And that's why David gets so angry. He says, "As the Lord lives, the man who's done this deserves to die," because the rich man comes in and just kills the lamb, and prepares it for another person to eat. Just how heartless and disgusting that is. And you see, David is like drawn in because, look at how much that man cares for that lamb. And then you turn it back to, look at how much Uriah was caring for Bathsheba, and then you destroyed that. You destroyed that. And so you see that, that stirs the heart, because look at that closeness. And then you think about bringing that into the marriage. Look how close that marriage relationship, how amazing that is. And then you're a person that came in and destroyed that. That's horrible. That's evil. That man deserves to die, he says. And that's true. That's true. And then you also get another example I want to give to you is Paul's command on physical intimacy. Because if you're married, you should pour all your fondness and desires into that one person. And the other teaching of that is in 1 Corinthians 7 by Paul in the New Testament here. Because he says, "Now concerning the matters about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman." That's what they were saying. They're actually saying the opposite of what Solomon says in Proverbs. He's like, no, you should get married. You should have sexual relations with women. Get married. If you're tempted to sin, then you should do that. And so the Corinthians were hearing something going around that says, you shouldn't get married at all then. And he says, "But because of temptation of sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband." And so there you go. He's going back to Proverbs, right? He's going back to the ancient wisdom here. He's not coming up with a new lesson. This is an old lesson. This is what Solomon said back in the book of Proverbs. You should have your own spouse. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth. Let her breast fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love. Not all in love itself, but in her love. Be intoxicated in her love. And that's what he's going back to. Because you have sexual temptation, right? Temptation to go after the forbidden woman, like in the beginning part. Well, here, get married. And then each man should have their own wife, and the wife should have a husband. And then the husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. So you're pouring all of that desire and energy into that one person. He says, for the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. You see what happens there? First, you have temptation of sexual immorality. It's all about you, right? Oh, I have these desires. I have these needs. But what happens when you get married? He says, now you got a switch. Now all those needs and desires are now to make the other person happy. It's to please the other person. So now it's like you have to, once you get married, you have to switch. Before you were all about yourself, always thinking about yourself. But now it's like, no, I don't have authority over my own body. I've given that to the other person. I'm submitting myself to that. And it's a switch. Because now all that sexual immorality drive is now to please the other person, not to please yourself. Because before you were all about please, the temptation of sexual immorality is really to please yourself. But when you get married, now it's about the other person. So it's a switch. It has to happen. If that doesn't happen, you see that it causes lots of problems in marriages because they don't turn that switch. They don't do it, and they're still about themselves, trying to please themselves, trying to get their own desires fulfilled out of the other person. And he says, no, you've given your body over to the other person now. And so that's how you get rid of sexual immorality. It's not about you anymore. It's about pleasing the other person, about satisfying the other person. So then he continues in verse 5. It says, do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time. It says, don't stop your relationship unless you agree to do so for a limited time. There's a limited time break here. Then he says that you may devote yourselves to prayer. So if you're going to devote yourselves to prayer, you're going to have a time that, maybe something, tragedy, or maybe the birth of a child, or something else that would prevent normal relationship, then devote yourself to prayer. But do that for a time. Agree to that. But then come together again, he says. So you're figuring out, okay, we're going to do this. We're not going to have sexual relations for a time. Why? Because there's probably lots of reasons, but we need to devote ourselves to prayer during this time. But then he says, but then you have to come back together. So you have the plan of coming back together. It's a limited time. So it's not open-ended. There's like, well, we're only going to do this for now, but then we'll come back together in a normal relationship. Because then he says, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So the idea is that you don't want Satan to come and tempt you. You can set yourself up to be tempted by Satan. You're inviting him to come to tempt you. Why would you do that? That's stupid. You're supposed to resist the devil, not invite him to come in and say, hey, we'd like you to tempt us to sin. Thank you very much. See how they're setting, if you do that, you're setting your marriage up to fail. If you don't have a good marriage, it's not a marriage of joy. It's because you're setting yourself up to fail. You've done that. And if you're still seeking your own needs instead of the needs of your spouse, your own desires instead of the desires of your spouse, then you're setting it up for failure. You're opening the door for Satan to tempt you too. And so, there you go. And if you have temptation of sexual morality, you should get married. If you don't get married, if you're not actively seeking a wife and you're just giving into sexual morality, then again, you're inviting Satan to tempt you. See, all these things are about Satan allowing and actually inviting Satan to tempt you, because you know what's going to happen. He's going to come and do that. There's the open door. So, there you go. That's the idea of marriage. That's what you should do. All that energy should be poured into that one person. Forsake all others, into that one person. Then what else does he say? Well, the next thing he says here, going back to this other part, he says, where am I at? 16, 17. Should your springs be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets, let them be for yourself alone and not for strangers with you. Now, what is he talking about here? Well, he's talking about the idea of children, right? The springs and streams. Now, we can get this confused, but this is an Old Testament kind of proverbial way of saying kids. Your streams of water, the springs. The idea is children. And you see that in Isaiah 48:1, where it says, "Hear this, O house of Jacob, you are called by the name of Israel, and who came from the waters of Judah." So he's saying, you're the waters of Judah, you're the descendants, you're downstream, right? You're the stream of water that's come out, and here's Judah, and you're kind of the waters down the road. You're downstream. And so that's kind of a biblical way of saying children. They're the descendants, the people that came from the water of Judah, it's his descendants. That's what he's talking about here. So when it talks about why should your springs be scattered abroad? Why should your streams of water be in the streets? He says, children are a blessing to those who seek purity. Right? Why should that happen? You should have children with your one wife. Right? Get married, have children with your wife. Because he's saying this is basically a warning to the promiscuous. Why are you having children with everybody? Let them be for yourself alone and not for strangers with you. Don't let your children be, taken by other people because you're being promiscuous. Right? We see that a lot in our society today. The idea of there's for other people, or you can even bring abortion into this idea, right? Let them be for yourself alone, not for the foreigner, not for the strangers, not for people that you don't know. Don't be having kids with people you don't know, because then the kid is for that person. It won't be for you. And so that's the idea here: is that have kids with your wife. Have a family. Raise children. This is the best way that God has created everything. If you're going to do this, do it the right way. Do it the way that brings joy. Do it the way that brings blessing. Otherwise, you're just bringing burdens. You're bringing problems on you. And so that's the idea. Often children are seen as a burden then. Why? Because you're not having kids with your spouse. Your one spouse, whom you are going to live with until death do you part. Otherwise, the children are for somebody else. And then you have the step idea, and then you have all this other stuff. And so he's saying, this is not the right way. This is not the best way. There's the best way, and there's a way that seems right to man. The best way is that a man and woman get married, and they have children in that marriage. He's saying, why should your springs be scattered abroad? Why should you be having children with all these other people? And then they won't be your children. Some other man will take them. He'll raise them. So the idea here is get married, have children with just your wife. That's it. Don't be spreading, children all over the place. Don't be promiscuous. Don't be adulterous. Stay with the wife. And then verse 20, why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman and embrace the bosom of an adulteress? Why should you do that? It should seem absurd to engage in sexual morality. That's how it is. That's how we should be thinking. And when we see that, it's why are you doing this? Why would you do that? Why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman? You can be intoxicated with your wife. You can have a wife. You can have joy. You can have all these great things. You can have children, that are your kids, and they'll always be your kids. They won't be taken away by other people. They won't be, destroyed early. They'll be yours. They'll be a blessing to you. Why would you choose curses? Why would you choose destruction? Why would you choose evil? Why would you choose wickedness? Right? Why would you choose that? Why should you do that? And so it should seem like this is the height of idiocy. Sexual immorality should be like, this is the stupidest thing I could ever do. And that's how we should view it. Like pornography, that should be the stupidest thing I do. That is the dumbest thing I've ever done. Right? That's how we should think. Committing adultery, that is the dumbest plan ever. This is the stupidest thing I could ever do, is to commit adultery. That should be the thought, especially of Christians, but really everyone should think that way. Right? This is ancient wisdom here we're talking about. This is God's wisdom, God's way to say, hey, this is how you ought to live. He says, sexual morality, stupid. This is the dumbest thing. It's the height of idiocy. You want to be an idiot? Committing sexual immorality. You know, become transgendered, become homosexual, you know, be promiscuous, you know, have sex outside of marriage, look at pornography, do all these things. That is the height of idiocy. That is the height of the depraved mind. This is a debased mind. It says in Romans 1. You want the debased mind? You want a mind that is fruitless, it says, that doesn't do anything? Then go ahead and do that. But if you want a mind that's going to produce, that's going to be good, that's going to be, you're going to have things that last for eternity, get married, you know, and then fulfill your spouse's desires, and you'll have joy. That's what you need to do. So,